Hello. Hi. It is Quentin. I'm here. Hey. All right, today I want to speak on weapon stats, how they affect different guns. Um, because I feel like it's good to have a foundation before I start going over um the new guns and what they do and what the frame relevance and damage and yada 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 yada. All right. So cool. Let's make this happen. First of all, okay, that didn't make it any bigger, and it kind of pisses me off. I'm not gonna lie. Um, I will mention I have a Discord that I update different thoughts about Destiny on frequently, with a learning uh channel. Um, this is where I'm getting this information from that I am regurgitating to you. So if you prefer it in a more written format, I typically write these out and then I use it as an outline to go over my what do you need to know videos. So, um, firstly, impact. Generally, impact means nothing. To go into slightly more detail, I believe what they were going for is a general damage per bullet per weapon archetype, but based off all weapon types. If that sounded complicated, don't worry about it because it doesn't matter. Um, I'll explain the part that you need to know for why impact doesn't matter. So, um, impact is supposed to basically show your damage, but realistically, every single frame does the same amount of damage. For example, we're going to use a PvP example, but this also applies in PvE, where if you're using an adaptive frame hand cannon, think Spare Rations, Fatebringer, Midnight Coup, Better Devils, any of those. If you are within range and um, you deal a headshot, it's going to be 81 damage. That's just how it's going to work. As long as it's an adaptive frame and you land a crit, that's what's going to happen. Now, this also applies in PvE. I will be giving arbitrary numbers because I don't have specific numbers because it's not really relevant. It's only relevant to the explanation I'm trying to give. So that same adaptive frame hand cannon, right? If you shoot a minor enemy, um, that's kind of big. So the red bars, the guys with just pure red bars like that. Let's say you do 100 damage, right? 100 damage is enough to kill. Doesn't matter how much health they have. That's not relevant to what we're trying to say. You're gonna deal 100 damage per hit, per headshot, right? Those elite enemies, you're also gonna do 100 damage per headshot, but they have more health, right? So same thing. These are under the same category, right? Now majors slash mini bosses, which I start to call yellow bars, right? On that enemy, instead of doing 100 damage with your hand cannon, you're going to do 75 damage. So you're losing damage, right? And then versus a boss, you're doing like 45 damage with your hand cannon. So the reason I bring this up is typically, I believe this applies across the board, but typically primary weapons get a huge loss versus um, majors and bosses. They're not generally designed to deal with those quickly. Once you see a different bar, you need to swap weapons, or you need to, or you need to buff yourself, or have a weapon perk increase, damage increase, or debuff the enemy. You need to do more than just shoot them. Whereas the minors and elites are supposed to be just tough enough where you should be able to shoot them. That's the thought process. And this is why impact doesn't matter. Because as long as you know the rounds per minute and the frame of the weapon type, you will know the exact amount of damage that it's doing, barring damage increases of some sort, right? All right, range. Another one that's really complicated. I'm gonna attempt to shorten the thought process on this one. I don't like that picture. There we go. So, in a nutshell, the way that range works is there are bands in which you will do the maximum amount of damage before you hit what's called fall off. I'll explain what that means in a minute, but I digress. For example, here, if we keep with the hand cannons, you can ignore all this stuff on the left, just this one on the far right. 24 meters. At 24 meters, your hand cannon will be doing max damage if you have 0 range. If you have no range on your rage bar, which no hand cannon can do, I'm pretty sure, right? If you have maximum range on your hand cannon, 100 range on your hand cannon, you're gonna be doing maximum damage, that same 81 or 100, depending on PvE or PvP that I've been using in these examples. You're gonna be doing that damage at 37.5 meters if you have 100 range. So that's the band. If you have 0 range, you're at 24, and if you have 100 range, you're at 37.5. Um, to me, the most important thing to note is the 50 range mark, uh, because to me, once you at about 50 range, you're halfway to where you want to be. If you have to invest much more into that gun to get more range, it's typically not worth it. But I digress. That is the main thing that range does. Now, range fall off would mean that, let's say we have that 0 range hand cannon and you shoot something at 25 meters, right? Your damage will start dropping. And for some guns, it's harsher than others. Hand cannons are an example of a very harsh drop off. And these are all relative numbers. I don't have specific numbers, but this is the way it functions. You would go from the 100 PvE damage at 24 meters and in to at 25, you would have like 80 damage. At 26, you're doing 60 damage. Eventually, there's a floor, but realistically, if you're doing less damage, you need to be closer because it's not that much harder to take a couple steps forward in PvE compared to PvP. Right? So that's the important parts of what range does. It does other things, but yeah, nothing that I want to note yet. Stability. I have a video, a little short little video. It's like six seconds. All right. You see the double rings here, the ring here, and the ring inside. These are in no discernible order because I'm not smart enough to know. Your aim assist cone and your aim assist cone and how it widens. I guess it's maximum girth. That's what she said. Um, you watch when I full auto that it blooms outward. And not every reticle is exactly the same, but it will always be the same concept. And the thing to note here is you see when I'm reset, I start this small area and then it spreads out to a much wider area. This is what stability changes. More stability means smaller area for shooting by just holding down the trigger. So the more you shoot, the more your circle will grow, which means the more your bullets will spread. And you solve this problem by adding more stability or by learning how to control the recoil, and instead of holding down the trigger, you have to do more tap taps. Um, how important is this? Um, in PvE, not very. This is more of a PvP thing, if you ask me. There are very few weapons that it matters on, and most of those weapons are bad in PvE, so realistically, I wouldn't worry about it too much, unless the gun just feels really bad, in which case, maybe add stability, um, but then you're probably just using a bad gun in the first place, so if the gun feels like you're shooting directly at them, and you're missing shots, it's probably because of your stability, or a combination of stability and range. And another trait that we'll talk about later. Reload speed is basically the exact same thing as range as far as from the band from 0 to 100. Each archetype and frame, and certain frames within archetypes, have a reload speed band, and the only way to break out of that band is with specific um, reload speed animation multipliers from specific weapon uh, perks or traits, such as Outlaw, Rapid Hit, Outlaw Magazine. You really just kind of got to know the perks or know the traits to be able to discern that, but there's plenty of resources that can help you with that if it is something you are worried about. Because by the time you're really worried about that, you probably already kind of know what else is going on. This is one of the more important traits in PvE for any kind of ad clear weapon, um, reload speed. So there we go. Aim assistance. Now this is really complicated and I'm not smart enough to explain it perfectly. Basically, aim assistance and range, zoom, stability, all those play into gun feel. Um, for example, if a person's head is here, where my little marker is, if you have really high aim assist, then you can still hit this person despite being like off, right? That's what aim assist does. It just kind of bends the bullets to help you out. It's exactly what it sounds like. And this also applies for mouse and keyboard. I don't know why some mouse and keyboard people feel like you're just a god and you hit everything. I doubt it, unless your name is Say Wallow. But anyways, yeah, that's basically aim assistance to the best of my knowledge. And I have a little graphic here that helps people understand it better if you understand how these guns work better in the first place, which I do not. So yeah. Zoom. This meme is basically how Zoom used to work. Now the range, this meterage, should just be your aim assist fall off, which is separate from your range fall off, which basically is just going to make your gun feel more sticky, feel like you're still able to land shots from further than the amount of damage you lose from gun fall off from range. So you'll still lose the damage, but it'll still be easy to land the shot. Um, with less zoom, it is harder to land shots outside of whatever band your gun is in. Airborne effectiveness is all the stuff we just talked about, but how well it works while you jump in the air. Well, I guess not all the stuff. Reload speed or zoom doesn't have anything to do with it, but everything else is affected by your airborne effectiveness, and the higher your airborne effectiveness, the easier it is for you to do what you do when you're on the ground, because Bungie felt like people were jumping too much in PvP, and it created a skill gap that they were not comfortable with. Rounds per minute is what it sounds like. It is basically how fast the gun shoots. To me, the only reason why rounds per minute is important is to show you the gun's archetype at a glance. Magazine size is pretty self-explanatory. It does work off a similar band system. There is only so many bullets you can have in a gun, but most of those are changed by the second column traits, up or down. And guns are also differentiated by the number of bullets that they have. In the magazine, it's a way to give them more identity from Bungie. We're gonna skip recoil duration because it's kind of complicated. Handling, handling, um, handling is how fast you put away and take out a specific gun. If it takes you 0.5 seconds to take out your hand cannon that has 100 handling, but you have another hand cannon that's the same archetype that has 0 handling, then that could take a whole second to take out. These are arbitrary numbers, but bear with me. So you can put away one gun in 0.5 seconds and pull the other one out in 1 second, so it takes 1.5 seconds to swap guns and have it ready to be fired. Um, that is one aspect of handling. Handling is also the amount of time it takes you to go from shooting from the hip to aiming down sights and ready to fire. So handling is really important in PvP. Not quite as important in PvE, but there are situations like with sniper rifles I really like handling because I want to bring it out, do the thing, and put it away quickly. Same thing like grenade launchers, breech-loaded grenade launchers, heavy weapons like rockets and grenade launchers. The handling is really important so that you can get the gun out, do the damage, put it back away, move on with your life. Um, frames. Frames are tied to rate of fire almost exclusively. Bungie's been fiddling with adjusting those things, but frames and um, rate of fire are they coexist. For example, if you have a adaptive frame hand cannon, we're going to keep the same through line here. Adaptive frame hand cannon is it fires at 140 rounds uh, per minute. That's just kind of how it works. If you have an aggressive frame hand cannon, it's going to fire at 120 rounds per minute. If you have a precision frame hand cannon, it's going to fire at 180 rounds per minute. There are things that can adjust this on certain guns, and exotics tend to really fiddle around with that as well. Like the last word, I think, has like 225 rounds per minute, which is ridiculous compared to 180 from precision frames, but again, I digress. The point here is just that frames are important because they help you know what the gun does generally at a glance. Aggressive frame weapons typically are harder to control but do a bunch of damage compared to their counterparts. High impact frames are typically better at longer ranges and do a bunch of damage at one time compared to their peers. Precision, they're also inherent frame buffs. Any precision frame weapon can basically ignore recoil because the gun will recoil vertically regardless. Um, and they typically feel pretty good to use. Um, Adaptive frame weapons have they're generally good. They're the middle point of their archetype. So an adaptive frame auto rifle is typically in the middle of all of the stats compared to their brethren, and so on and so forth. Um, Certain frames also have inherent benefits, such as high impact frames. If you are stationary, will have more stability, and I believe the burst frames, the heavy burst frames. Don't know if it's heavy burst or adaptive burst. Pretty sure it's just heavy. Like heavy burst frames, they have they take less flinch, just flat out. Lightweight frames help you move faster, that sort of thing. All right, now to go over recoil direction. The way recoil direction is based off this, of course, it's not as big as I want it to be. It's based off. Still didn't get any bigger. I hate it here, dude. It's based off this graph. So basically, if you land on a 0, a 100, or a 5 of in between any of those numbers, so 5, 15, 25, yada, 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 then the gun will generally shoot vertically and deviate left and right occasionally. Um, yeah, give me a second actually. Movie magic. I know, scary. I'm really good at this. Anyways, so this gun has an 80 recoil direction, so when you shoot, it will drift to the right, like up and right. If you don't apply any, um, if you don't attempt to control the recoil. So, I said up to the right. Of course, it makes me out a liar. There goes your up and to the right. Yeah, yeah, and that's the more standard variation. Yeah, see the one we got the first time was just an anomaly, which of course happens because video game programming, but regardless, this gun has 80 recoil direction, and this little picture here shows you kind of how it's going to fire. It fires up and then anywhere in that white space, right? Because it's at 80, it's still gonna spread out left and right a bit. If this was a number that ended in 0, it was like 10, then this slice of pie would be wider, which means that it would shake more, be more like that, right? As opposed to the more compact variation there. Now, there are both traits and mods to help alleviate this. As you can see, going to 95 recoil direction makes the gun shoot more vertically compared to before. And this again is without me attempting to control the recoil. This is the gun just firing, doing what it does. This is what, where are you? Get it together. So this is what recoil direction does. Now, I know what you're thinking. Great, they show it to us in game. This is awesome. I will be able to use this. No, you won't, because Bungie decided they were going to change this. And now guns, that's why I was using the older gun, because now newer guns have their own predetermined recoil patterns. That, so now you basically just have to get the gun and just shoot it at the wall and see if you like it. See if you feel like you can control the recoil. I guess to be fair, this does give each one of the guns their own identity. My problem with this, and this has already been acknowledged by Bungie, is that there is no um, solid way of knowing other than just shooting the gun and knowing that there is a predetermined recoil pattern. So something that's on the radar that just haven't had a fix, and I want to say that was talked about a year ago. So maybe we're getting close to some sort of uh, fix to visually show better the recoil direction. But yeah, that is all of the stats on guns, why they are or are not important, and the things to note for guns in Destiny. Now, I did not go over stats such as blast radius and um, velocity um, or draw speed because I feel like those deserve a more specific uh, video on just them because they are the outliers as opposed to most guns in the game applying by these rules that are stated here. And again, it is on the Discord, so if you are interested in um, learning things about Destiny, I'll try and put a link to the Discord in the description. But that's it. Later.